Okay, I'm here in Burbank, California, and I'm outside of the old Warner Brothers film studios. And as you can see here, you've probably seen that mountain a million times in a lot of Warner Brothers films. And here's a shot right here of the back sets. Okay, I'm going to start this virtual tour of the famous Warner Brothers studios. And right here is where you start on the Warner Brothers studio tour if you're at all interested in coming. And I'm going to take you fans first. I want to get a shot of the Daffy Duck, this statue, because that was the biggest mistake of the Warner Brothers. Jack especially, he was the culprit. Like an idiot, he sold every one of the 400 cartoons, the Merry Melodies, Looney Tunes, for $3,000. He sold every one of them, 400 of them. And since then, because of that stupid mistake, they lost out on millions of dollars of profits. Porky Pig, Bugs Bunny, and Daffy Duck. So I wanted to start this virtual tour. I thought this would be pretty cool. And here's the tour bus. And let's get a nice shot of the cartoons that changed animation history, along with the Walt Disney animation. And I'm shocked that they don't have Porky Pig. Okay, and when Harry found out that Jack sold every one of them for $3,000 a piece, he said, "That son of a bitch." And until the day he died, anytime in a meeting with Harry and Albert, the first thing under that the people in the meeting would always hear one of them mutter, "That son of a bitch." Okay, well, here you go. Warner Brothers studio tour. I don't know how much it is. It probably can be more than 50 bucks, I reckon, but who knows. Okay, so this is the first part of the tour, virtual tour, that I'm going to take you fans. It's probably the biggest studio in LA. It's huge. So let's go. And here's one of the back entrances off of Warner Boulevard and Avon. And I guess that's a cooling tower they use for refrigeration, obviously, for probably sets that require some type of wintry environment. Okay, well, let's go. And gate 5, I'm at probably, I think I'm at more like the northern part. And check that out, the old water tower. And thankfully, I guess Warner Brothers still kept their emblem, unlike the old MGM studios. And here's another shot. Okay, let's go. Let's continue this virtual tour of this beautiful, large, fantastic studio that created some of the best movies of the 30s, 40s, and if not the whole 20th century. Okay, let's go.
Called Camelot. 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 Now say it out with love and joy. Camelot.
Okay, we're at the I guess the north entrance of the famous Warner Brothers studios at gate 5, and we're at the corner of Warner Boulevard and Avon Street right there. And in back of me is the where the studio tour begins every morning, the Warner Brothers studio tour. And this is where you come if you want to go into the famous old Warner Brothers studios. So they were actually first on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. And after the success of the Jazz Singer in 1927, they were able to buy these old studios that were once the studios of First National. and they were already here, but this is probably one of the biggest studios in LA. It's actually the biggest that I've seen, and it's original. And there's the famous water tower. Thankfully they still kept their emblem, and as you can see, the back sets, and the famous studio that gave us George Raft, James Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, Betty Davis, Olivia de Havilland, Errol Flynn, James Dean. They did a streetcar named Desire here, and they made so much money off the jazz singer that it was ironic that the one of the brothers, Sam, there were actually 4 brothers, Sam, Jack, Harry, and Albert. And Sam and Jack, they were head of production, and Sam was I think he was the third brother, third youngest, and he was the one who influenced the president, Harry, to buy the recording equipment, to make a deal with Western Electric, to put sound effects on a movie called Don Juan with John Barrymore. And then that was just kind of like a gimmick, and Harry said, no, positively not, that's as far as we're gonna go, just sound effects. In fact, that was Harry's Sam's idea, just use sound effects, and that way we can save money in all the Warner motion picture theaters without having to pay musicians for the silent films. And then I don't know how they got to think about making the dialogue in sound too. And anyway, after it was released, it made so much money, box office records, that Sam died the day before it was released in October of 1927, which is quite ironic, because what would the death of one Warner brother, there was the rebirth or a new birth that gave him this fantastic expensive studio that they were able to buy with that money that Sam influenced Harry to buy the equipment, and thusly to make those huge profits. Okay, I'm gonna take you, all you fans all over the world, of one of the biggest studios, at least the outside part, just so you can get a perspective of how big the studio is. And if you've ever been a fan of Humphrey Bogart, James Cagney, Public Enemy, all those wonderful gangster films of the 1930s, this is where it all began. I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, Paul Mooney. Great films, fantastic. Okay, let's continue. And I just want to say one more thing, that while the Warner Brothers were in Burbank, I'm sorry, before they moved to Burbank, they were on Sunset, and the way they made their money in the 1920s was with an animal character named Rin Tin Tin. And they made so much money with Rin Tin Tin that Jack started calling him the dog the mortgage lifter. Okay, and one more thing before I stop this little part here. They were really bankrupt, practically bankrupt, when they were on Sunset, because of the big 5 studios that they were competing with. But because of the revolution that Warner Brothers started with the talkies, they were able to lift themselves out of bankruptcy. Okay, let's continue this tour of the Warner Brothers studios. Okay, follow me.
Tales that you remember of Camelot. Ask every person if he's heard.
Okay, get a load of those beautiful pepper trees and eucalyptus trees. Okay, I forgot to mention in the other video that I just finished with on this corner, that Camelot, that song you were hearing from the famous movie Camelot from 1967, that was the last movie that Jack was head of production of. And because of its rank failure, instead of putting Richard Burton and Julie Andrews, he casted Richard Harris and Vanessa Redgrave, and that's what made him want to retire after that in 1969. So I just wanted to mention that the budget was 13 million for it, and they made 31 million, but I guess it was considered a failure, even though it was fantastic. I thought the singing, Richard Harris was great. I thought fantastic. Okay, I just wanted to mention that. So let's continue on this virtual tour of the outside part, at least, to get a perspective, like I said before, of how big the studio really is. Okay. Thank you.
Not to the simple.
Okay, let's get a nice shot from this angle of the great Warner Brothers Studios. Okay, like I said before, if it wasn't for RIN TIN TIN generating their income in the 20s, they wouldn't have survived all the bankruptcies they had in the late 20s, and which barely was able to allow them to stumble until they made their fortune off the jazz singer. And then after making their money off that film, they bought this studio here, like I said before, in 1928. And their first movie here was a talkie called Lights of New York with Helene Costello and Eugene Pellett, and that was the sister, if you're at all interested, of Dolores Costello, the woman who married John Barrymore, who gave us John Barrymore Jr. and hence Drew Barrymore. And they made 12 talkies in 1928, and they led the revolution. These guys were way ahead of the game until everybody caught up. They were way ahead of the game. And if it wasn't for Sam, who unfortunately died at 40, they would never have made their mark. Because, like I said before, it was supposed to be just for sound effects and not really dialogue. But then I guess at the last minute they said, well, what the hell, let's use the dialogue and put it in sound. So here you go, another perspective of the great Warner Brothers Studios. And let me walk to the corner. I'm on Hollywood Way, and just to give you a pretty good perspective so far, this place is huge. Okay, let's continue with this virtual tour of the Warner Brothers Studios.
Not to the simple.
Okay, we're on the south side of the famous Warner Brothers studio, and I thought this would be a great shot right here of the sound stages made famous in take for example Petrified Forest, 1936, with Humphrey Bogart, Betty Davis. I don't know why, but I dug a lot that old grandpa guy, Charles Grapewind, in that film. I thought he was hilarious. He didn't get very much credit. The film studios were George Raft, Paul Mooney, all the gangster films, Angels with Dirty Faces, Roaring Twenties, Public Enemy. Here's a perspective right here. I'll give you guys a shot, the way it looks. And their first gangster film here was Little Caesar with Edward G. Robinson, and then they did James Cagney and Public Enemy, and then of course the famous Casablanca with Humphrey Bogart in 1942, Ingrid Bergman. Those were the sound stages, folks, right there. A huge studio, pretty much original. Most of the other studios have been bought and sold. I haven't done my due diligence much on who owns this, but I don't quite understand why they kept their emblem intact, whereas you go to the old MGM studios and then they have Columbia up on top. So okay, and then like I said before, this is where James Dean did all his films. Marlon Brando did Streetcar Named Desire with Vivian Leigh. And Ronald Reagan, of course, 1942, Kings Row. Where's the rest of me? And The Dark Knight in 2008, if you can believe it, made $533 million. And in 2009, The Dark Knight Rises, $448 million. And you wonder why they're still here. And these are the famous studios where Errol Flynn spent all his time in making those great swashbucklers in the 1930s with Basil Rathbone and a multitudinous amount of starlets that they would put next to him. Okay, let's continue this virtual tour of the great Warner Brothers studios. And if you're a fan of James Dean, you've seen him in those famous photos where he's outside the soundstage as well. There they are, folks, where they filmed Giant, East of Eden, and Rebel Without a Cause. Okay, let's continue this tour. Okay, let's get a shot from this angle of the great Warner Brothers film studios. I didn't realize that film was made by Warner Brothers, this new one, Black Mass. I didn't even know that was Johnny Depp. I didn't even recognize him with his bald head there. But okay, here's a nice shot, I think, from this angle. And we're coming up more like from the southwest. And it's built along the LA River, what they call the LA River, for what that's worth. That's actually in a cement arroyo, but that was the original river, at least the course it took. And here you go, you fans, from this perspective right here, if you're at all interested. All the stuff that they use to build this movie sets right here. Pretty big studio. They did Dirty Harry here with Clint Eastwood in the 70s. They just recently did that Mad Max with Charlize Theron here. And then I guess these are all the TV shows they make here. I'm not a big fan of TV. This one I've heard about. And then this new one, superhero one. And then this is the famous Gate 2. I could just see James Dean, Humphrey Bogart. And here you go, folks. Great shot. The famous studio where the great George Raft, James Cagney once walked. Okay. And then the recent venture right here, Black Mass. And then this one with Robert De Niro. Then The Man from U.N.C.L.E. And then I guess they're doing this Scooby-Doo here. And here's the old administration building where all the movie stars from the 20s used to walk into and sign their contracts. With the imperious Jack Warner, head of production, after his brother Sam died. The day before the jazz singer was released. Here's a little shot. Good to see James Dean motoring in there on his Triumph. And of course the old water tower. And then that famous mountain that you see a lot behind the old sets in the movies. Okay, thank you for following me on this tour of the Warner Brothers famous motion picture studios. Please subscribe to my channel, and long live the dream that the films promise. Okay, thank you very much.